no exaggeration to say that Wales has some of the finest sea kayaking in the world. From wild offshore islands and fast tidal streams to sheltered bays and cliffs with abundant marine wildlife, there's truly a sea kayaking experience on offer to suit everyone. There's been a massive increase in the number of people getting out on the sea using all different types of kayaks, canoes and even stand-up paddleboards. This video has been produced for all paddlers to raise awareness about some of the fantastic marine wildlife that we have here in Wales, to encourage you to get out there and enjoy it, but also to get some advice from the experts, not only on how to stay safe, but on how to make sure that we plan ahead to minimise disturbance to wildlife.
Well, since I took up sea kayaking 20 years ago here in Wales, we've seen an explosion in popularity in the sport. There are far more people taking up sea kayaking in all its different forms. The equipment's developed as well. We've got sit-on-top kayaks, touring boats, and we've got specialist sea kayaks. So people are going out on the sea for a much wider range of reasons than they may have been in the past. So all this increased activity is bringing additional considerations, not least safety concerns. The increased numbers of people that we've got kayaking on the sea is resulting in an increased number of Coast Guard call-outs with groups that are either underestimating the conditions or getting into difficulties. So it's really important to do the proper planning, to consider the weather and the tides, and to make sure that we're properly trained for the journeys that we're planning to take on. So as your skills develop, you'll start to plan sea kayak journeys that take you into the more exposed and challenging coastlines. These are the places that will bring you into contact with some of the spectacular marine wildlife that Wales is famous for.
There are also some less remote areas of the coast which are really important wildlife habitats, which you can easily get to even as a novice paddler. It's particularly these areas that are coming under increasing pressure from kayakers approaching too close to wildlife.
Here at Staphole Quay, it can take literally 15 minutes to paddle over to Staphole Head. This is a really important site for cliff nesting seabirds. People can easily make this journey on sit-on-top kayaks as well. And there have been a number of occasions where people have got too close to Staphole Head when they're paddling. And also going through the caves, which has been disturbing the nesting seabirds there. And around Staphole Head there's the tidal races, which can get quite treacherous, and people can quite easily get caught out there. My role here as a National Trust kayaking instructor is not only to teach people the basic skills and safety, but also to educate people about the wildlife. So if they do go out by themselves, they can do so safely and also without disturbing the wildlife.
It's clear that as kayakers we need to plan our journeys not just with regard for the conditions and the tides, but also to think ahead about wildlife and access. All land in Wales has an owner, so when you're accessing the coast for kayaking, it's important to respect other people. This starts with the basics: parking responsibly, maintaining your modesty when you're changing, using appropriate toilet facilities, and being sure that you have permission to launch if that's necessary. Some parts of the coast in Wales, especially the offshore islands, are so important for wildlife that restrictions are in place on where you can land and explore to protect the wildlife from disturbance. Scoma in Pembrokeshire is an example of an island which has quite strict access agreements and bylaws in place, but for very good reasons.
Scoma is an amazing place. It's a national nature reserve, and I'm a kayaker myself, and I really enjoy seeing other people explore the islands. But there's a lot of islands out here, and a lot of the islands are run and managed by various organisations who are keen to preserve the wildlife. And as part of that, you need to plan how you're going to land on the island. So, for example, on Scoma, there's up to 300,000 breeding pairs of Manx shearwaters, so we can't have people landing everywhere because the burrows will just get squashed. So we only have landing here in North Haven on the right-hand side of the beach. And Stockholm Island just to the south as well. We don't have any landings at all on that island because the colony is even more dense. Finding out information about access for the islands in Pembrokeshire is really, really simple. There's lots of different islands, but if you go online, there's a website which is pembrokeshireMarineCode.org, and there you can download the maps which tell you where the good bits of wildlife are, but also how to behave around there. You can also get a waterproof version, which is available, and we can send that to you for basically the price of the postage. and there's no real excuse for not having the information.
There are some detailed marine code maps here in Pembrokeshire, but they don't cover every section of the coastline. And of course there are equally as important wildlife reserves dotted around the whole coastline of Wales. For areas of the coast where there are no detailed marine code maps, if you simply follow the guidelines in the Welsh Sea Kayaking Code of Conduct on this video, and find out about any access agreements in place before you set off, you will be doing your bit to help minimise disturbance to wildlife.
Wales is such a spectacular place for sea kayaking, whether you're out on a sit-on-top kayak or exploring the coastline, catching some fish as you go, or maybe discovering the offshore islands like I am today with the puffins here in the background. One of the things that can really add to your enjoyment of the day is if you learn a little bit about the different species of the wildlife that you're likely to see, you just enjoy it so much more. But also some of the wildlife we have is protected by law from disturbance. So as sea kayakers we have a duty, a responsibility to make sure we do learn a bit about the wildlife, to make sure that we can minimise any disturbance that we might cause.
As sea kayakers in Wales, you're going to encounter a wide variety of seabirds along the Welsh coast, because the Welsh coast is quite an important place. But the most likely are probably the auk family, that's the guillemots, the razorbills and the puffins. They're all quite distinctive in their own way. Guillemots have got a very sharp pointy beak and are generally brown and white. Razorbills are more black and white, and they've got a more chunky beak with a white flash down it. And puffins, we all know what puffins look like. They've got a colourful bright beak and they've got orange legs as well. So they're quite distinctive really. Other seabirds you're likely to encounter along the Welsh coast would be cormorants and shags. So shags are distinguished from cormorants by the green hue to their plumage, whereas cormorants have a purple hue and during the breeding season have a white breeding patch. So seeing those birds on the water would indicate you're close to their nests. Oyster catchers on the rocky outcrops and beaches, they're distinguished by their clear black and white plumage with a long orange beak, and also their distinctive call. So it's good to watch out for them, especially if they're making quite a lot of noise. That might indicate they've got a nest close by to be aware of. Certain areas of the Welsh coast are really important for a bird called the chough, which is a member of the crow family. It's not a seabird. It's distinguished by a bright red beak and bright red feet and a very distinctive call. And they're a cave nester, so being conscious of the fact that there might be chough around in those areas when entering sea caves, because it's a very popular thing for doing when you're on the water, just to be aware during the breeding season that you might be causing disturbance to these birds, and if they are agitated and calling at you, then it's time to leave. Of course, the other seabird you're very likely to see along the Welsh coast is gannets. They range along the entire length of the coast. Often see them diving for fish, very, very spectacular plunge dive, very large white bird with black wingtips. Quite often see them sat on the water, especially close to the breeding colonies. Of all the breeding seabirds in Wales, guillemots and razorbills are probably the most prone to disturbance from the water. Getting too close to them, causing them to leave the breeding ledges, can have significant impacts because they lay a single egg directly onto the rock face. So if they all fly off, if there's a mass exodus of birds, then a significant number of those eggs might end up in the water. And if they do, that's the end of the breeding attempt. They will not try, they will not relay, they will not try again. And if a portion of the eggs go, then the remaining birds who are still incubating are more prone to predation by gulls and by ravens, because they're less able to defend themselves. For the guillemots and razorbills, the breeding season starts at the beginning of February and extends through to the end of July. It's important to keep a distance away from the colony during those periods, so 50 metres is a sensible distance to be away. If you're 50 metres away and disturbance is obvious, the birds are leaving the colony or there's lots of flapping of wings and bobbing of heads, then staying further away is obviously desirable. So the breeding season is February to July, but the key months really for making sure there's no disturbance are May and June.
When you're out kayaking, you do need to observe the wildlife. You need to observe their behaviour. So if you see animals looking distressed, that means you're probably too close. Puffins, we don't really want to disturb rafts of puffins because at the minute they're feeding their young, and if they're carrying sand eels in their mouths, if they get scared by anything, be it a boat or a kayaker, they're going to want to drop their food instead of feeding the chicks.
Most of the offshore islands in Wales have strong tidal currents flowing around them. The water between here and Ramsey Island in Pembrokeshire is no exception, with some of the fastest tidal streams in the UK. Advanced kayakers come here to paddle around the island and also to play in the overfalls and the standing waves that are known as the bitches. The RSPB own the island and they manage it as a wildlife reserve, but it's not just the birds that they're interested in protecting.
Wales is very important for seals, for the grey seal, and here on Ramsey we account for around 500 to 700 pups a season. We're right in the middle of the pupping season now. As you can see over my shoulder, there's a few pups down there, and the pupping season runs from around the start of August, and that goes on right through to the end of November, the peak being around September, October time. So it's important, you know, when you're planning anything, to think about those dates. Seals are sensitive to disturbance, and especially so in the pupping season. Within 3 weeks the pups are fully weaned, and in that spell they need to have every feed that they can in order to set them up for their first year in life, really. It's vitally important that they get enough milk in that period, so any disturbance can affect that. Then comes the molt season as well, and so once they finish the pupping season, the adults will start to molt, which is equally as important a time for them, and they'll haul out on the beaches. You'll see large congregations of them, and this is where they shed the old fur and regrow a new coat, if you like. So you're almost looking from the start of August for the pups through the end of November, then the molt will start, and that can go on right through to the end of February into March. The Marine Code for kayakers in Wales includes a series of sensible guidelines, really, such as staying 50 metres away from any beaches where you see there are either adults or pups. But that's not a hard and fast rule. There will be times when that's still too close, so it's just a case of assessing the situation. If it looks like the cows are appearing agitated, if they start to move down the beach especially, that's a sign that you are too close, so you may have to back out even further than that. And just as you're paddling around, just keep your noise down in general. Think ahead, where might there be pups or adults? Might there be something around the corner, for example? You don't want to necessarily spook things as you approach. If you happen to be out on the water and you're lucky enough that a seal actually approaches you, and obviously enjoy the experience, just bear in mind, or think to yourself, why has it approached me? Just have a little look around. There might be pups around somewhere. It might just be very inquisitive, they often are. But just enjoy the experience and carry on your way, and don't outstay your welcome, basically.
The importance of the marine wildlife in Wales has been recognised in law through the many designations set up to protect species and habitats. There are sites of special scientific interest almost all the way along the coast, marine special areas of conservation, special protection areas for birds, and as well as being a national nature reserve, Skomer Island and the waters around it are also a marine nature reserve. So what does all this mean to you as a kayaker? Well, it means that you can find some of the most spectacular marine wildlife in the world here in Wales. But it also means that much of the wildlife you're likely to see is protected by law from disturbance. And that just serves to further reinforce the point that we have a responsibility to minimise any impacts that we might have when we're out paddling. The waters around Wales are also home to around 20 different species of whales, dolphins and porpoise.
Despite being the smallest, porpoise are perhaps the most commonly sighted cetacean in Welsh waters. But you may also be lucky enough to see Risso's dolphin and even whales. We have fin whales, minke whales and even killer whales off the coast here. I've also seen sunfish in the waters around this area, and you might be lucky enough to see basking sharks or even the elusive leatherback turtle. Here at Cardigan Bay there's a resident pod of bottlenose dolphins that you can often see from your boat. Whilst kayaks present less of a threat to cetaceans than motorised vessels, it is still possible to surprise them due to our quiet approach, and simply staying in an area and observing them for too long can also affect their behaviour and cause disturbance. So the message is, do get out and try and spot cetaceans by kayak, but follow these simple guidelines. Keep your group together and either stop or continue on your intended route. This will present predictable movements to the animals so that they can avoid you if they wish to. Don't chase after cetaceans or creep up on them, and leave any cetaceans with young well alone. Don't outstay your welcome. Around 10 to 15 minutes observation time should be plenty, then move on. You can also do your bit for marine wildlife by picking up some litter as you go along. Plastic bags and netting can be a real hazard to marine wildlife, killing turtles and entangling seabirds and seals. So if you can, pick some up, take it home. Any sightings of cetaceans, turtles, basking sharks and even jellyfish can be of real use to research into the health of Welsh seas. Reporting a sighting is simple to do. Simply record what you saw, when you saw it, and roughly where it was. There are local record centres covering the whole of Wales, which can be found online at lrcwales.org.uk. One last bit of best practice which can really help to stop the spread of invasive marine organisms is to make sure you check, clean and dry your equipment thoroughly before launching into new areas. This is especially important if you use your sea kayaking gear on inland waterways. Well, I hope you've been inspired to get out sea kayaking more and learn more about the marine wildlife in your area. Please do take a look at the Wales Sea Kayaking Code of Conduct, and here are some final top tips from the experts.
My top tip would be to get some coaching, no matter what level you are, especially for beginners, as this will really help you enjoy your paddling experience even more.
It's really important to be safe while you're on the water. You can do this by making sure that you've done your proper planning and that you've educated yourself about the weather and the tidal conditions for the day. It's very important to paddle within your own ability levels and to make sure that you're properly equipped. You'll also need to leave a plan for the day with a contact on the shore and to make sure that you've got a means of communication with you. Ideally this would be a VHF radio or possibly a mobile telephone so that you can get in touch if you've got any problems.
So my advice to kayakers really would be to enjoy the seabird colonies, but to stay 50 metres away from the cliffs. And if you see any signs of agitation in the birds, if you see birds starting to leave the colony, then to back off quietly and view the birds from further away.
If there's one bit of advice to take away, it's if you're paddling in late summer and the autumn months, just to bear in mind where seal pups are likely to be. Plan your stops carefully to make sure that it doesn't mean that you have to land on a pupping beach, and have a look for designated landing sites such as the harbour here on Ramsey, and make sure you end up there so you can enjoy your day to the full.
My advice to sea kayakers who really want to enjoy the wildlife out here is to basically approach with caution. So if you're getting too close to the guillemot colonies, you'll notice that the guillemots will be stabbing their beaks, making a lot of noise. That means you need to back off. Puffins, amazing here in North Haven. You'll see the adults carrying fish, but you do need to make sure that you don't disturb those rafts, because the minute you disturb those rafts, the adults might drop the sand eels, which means the chicks aren't going to get a feed that day.